Welcome to Beyond Well Science. I'm Sheila Hamilton. This is a program where we interview some of the scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors, the people who are trying to make better outcomes when it comes to mental health. And today we're talking with Jenny Johnstone. She is an associate professor at OHSU and also a family therapist, correct, Jenny?
That's correct, yes.
That's kind of an interesting combination, science and counselor.
Yes, I like to say I have been trained in the art and science of psychology.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, my first training was in the marriage and family therapy side, so it was counseling psychology, and I felt like we really got the background about how to work with people and how to do sessions. And then the clinical psychology gave me the science and the evidence-based practice.
Wow, so you're full spectrum.
I like to think so, but it's bringing those pieces together because it is important when someone is before you to be able to offer them something that has been shown to work, but also to make it human and to not just follow the manual because you have a person in front of you that maybe doesn't fit the exact script that the therapy calls for.
You know, it's fascinating that you say that because OHSU right now, known for its cancer research and individualized cancer research or cancer medicine is so important right now.
Yes.
Your unique body is different. Your cancer is different. We're going to tailor this approach. You think there's more room for that in dealing with mental health conditions and behavioral disorders?
Yes, I do think that. I do think that especially as we're thinking about what are the different treatments that work, expanding beyond some of the, when we think about medication, what are some of the other options, or where do we start, perhaps thinking of a different starting point than medications. Not that medications can't be helpful, or when you think about someone with depression or anxiety and maybe they need medication to get started feeling better, but not to have that expectation that they are going to stay on those medications forever, that they will only feel well when they're taking them.
That's so important. How did you get so interested in ADHD?
I got interested in ADHD because I have a son with ADHD and dyslexia, and I guess I should first say I got interested in maybe non-traditional, more complementary means of treatment for physical health disorders when my brother went to acupuncture school. And so I had a couple of really positive experiences using a more complementary approach for physical health symptoms, which led me to then think about helping my son with some of his ADHD symptoms and trialing medication, but then thinking, is this really all that there is? And so stumbling upon dietary information dating back, there's the Feingold diet, which has been around since the 70s, and looking at that and what was said about that. And I will say that I first got started on this journey when I was doing the counseling psychology. So I was a parent at that time and wanting something that worked for my child, not thinking so much about what does science say works. So that helped me kind of, because I was more open to what could work for my son, I opened the door to a lot of possibilities. And now with the clinical psychology background, I also come back to what does science say about it? Because parents can spend time and money on treatments that don't work.
Right.
And the problem is that you lose time and you lose money and you're not having something that's effective.
Yeah, and everyone's panicking when nothing's working, right?
Right.
What is ADHD? How do you describe it?
ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that's characterized by problems with attention that look like impulsivity, hyperactivity, and inattention. And the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, says that it needs to happen before age 12. But we are finding that there are some adolescents that maybe weren't diagnosed before then or don't have all the clear symptoms. But the thought is that they may have had enough structure in their life and enough things that were going well. They're good at school. They have a good connection with their parents. The temperaments match. That it wasn't obvious until they get into a situation where they're having to do more and more for themselves in terms of planning ahead, executive functioning, time management, that sort of thing.
And so you're saying that you're starting to see more diagnoses later, that it's not just the elementary school kid who can't sit still. You're starting to see middle school and high schoolers now being diagnosed with this.
Yeah, this is actually a whole big kind of other topic because, I mean, yes, that's true. The other thing we see is in really competitive schools, parents and children they're being asked to do a lot, and sometimes to achieve that, people feel that they might need some medication help, and one way to get that is to have an ADHD diagnosis or have more time. So there's a number of reasons why you might see a spike, in the high school years. But yes, the DSM has recognized that some symptoms may not be presenting as early as before. So previously it was age 7 and now it's age 12.
I want to come back and talk about that sometime, just because you just described the human brain having a capacity and a limit. And I'm like, yeah, because we're human, right?
Exactly.
And pushing ourselves to the extent that we're going to be like computers operating 24 hours, 7 days a week at this high level is so completely unrealistic. So I want to learn more about the specific study that you're doing at OHSU because you're using micronutrients.
That's correct. So I'll back up a minute and say, as I mentioned, I did my clinical training in New Zealand and I worked in the lab of Julia Ruckledge. And she, back in 2009, had already started doing studies initially with adults who had ADHD. And we were giving them either the micronutrients, which is a blend of roughly 36 ingredients, vitamins A through K, a bunch of minerals, very important. People often think about just vitamins, but minerals are equally or perhaps even more important, amino acids and antioxidants. Giving that or placebo to adults with ADHD. And we did, when we saw some positive results with the adults, we did an open label, which means everybody knows what they're getting, the real thing. Then we did a randomized control trial. We naturally followed on to see whether we could see similar signals in children. So we did an open label and a randomized control trial. And then we decided to move back to the U.S. for a number of reasons. And I looked up, we decided we were moving to Portland because we found the right sort of school for our son, who, as I mentioned, has ADHD and dyslexia. He went to Edison. It was a great fit. And I looked into who was doing ADHD research in Portland and found Dr. Joel Nigg. So I arrived here in Portland thinking I would start the study. And that was in 2014, and it took us 4 years to get started.
Wow.
But we are now enrolling children between the ages of 6 and 12 who have ADHD and an irritable component to their mood. I can tell you a little bit more about why we decided to do that. And they're randomized to either the micronutrients or placebo for 8 weeks, and then so they don't know what they're getting. And then the second 8 weeks, everybody gets the real thing.
What have you seen from the kids who had the micronutrients the entire time? Because then they benefited from 16 weeks of this kind of therapy, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we're still in the middle of our trial.
Okay.
So there isn't a lot I can say specifically about 8 weeks versus 16 weeks. And we do know that the placebo effect is real. So there are some people that benefit just by coming in to see us and having their parents think about how they're behaving, and we're asking them how they feel. So I can't say so much about our particular sample as to what they receive, but I can tell you that after 8 weeks, we have some parents come back in the lab and they're crying because things have changed for their child so much. And it's not just about the child. What they say is, this changes everything. Our family life is so much better because, and then they describe all of the little changes. It's like a snowball rolling downhill and getting bigger as it goes. Good begets good. And the child is doing well, and then people are saying nice things about them, and then they're motivated, and then they're getting rewarded. and everybody's feeling more encouraged. So that's been really it's
rewarding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So could you talk about the unique connection between the gut and between these micronutrients and what happens with the brain?
Yeah. So I think what you're asking is, why might this work?
Yeah.
And the first part of that is that what we eat impacts how we feel. We know that. We've known for some time that the brain sends signals to the gut. And that's why people will talk about having butterflies in their stomach, or if they're feeling stressed, they can't eat. That's that connection. But they've also found in animal research that the signal goes the other way. So the microbes in the gut communicate with the brain in a number of different ways. Kind of on a broader topic of diet, there are several studies, including longitudinal studies over time, that show change. People that eat a better diet with fewer processed foods and more of a whole foods diet, or a Mediterranean diet, which is fruits and vegetables and legumes and good fats, that people that have those more healthy diets have lower rates of anxiety and depression, and better attention, better sleep. And so the mechanisms behind that, in terms of this gut-brain axis, the part of the body that connects the two is the vagus nerve, and that runs from the brainstem down to the end of the spine. And the three parts of the central nervous system that are involved in this communication are the neurotransmitter system, the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system. And so each of those systems have different chemical messengers that connect, that take the information from what's going on in the gut and feed that back to the brain.
Who do you think is the perfect candidate for this? I mean, how wide a net can you cast for who this might actually work for?
That's a good question. So for our study, we're looking at kids with ADHD and with some irritability, because our previous two studies, and I'm talking specifically about the randomized control trials, showed benefit in mood, in adults specifically with mood, and in children with aggression and irritability that resulted in better peer relationships. I will also say that inattention improves in children. But this research has been done. They're not randomized control trials, but they are a variety of different other types of studies, whether they're single case studies or case series or database analyses. People with bipolar disorder, that was what the formula in the beginning was first designed for. And it's based on the animal science behind treating irritable pigs, tail biting and ear biting pigs. And one of the ways to address aggression is to put minerals with some vitamins in the pig's feed. And so that was the basis 20 plus years ago when the formula was developed.
That's incredible. I mean, I just started floating recently, in those incredible mineral baths, and you are so calm afterward. It's a little worrisome if you have to get something done. You're a little like, where'd my edge go? But it's true.
Yeah.
Just having that incredible magnesium fill your, it's just very, very calming.
Exactly. And magnesium is you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to just talk more about what people can do short of micronutrients, because I don't know if there is one formula you can take, or if you just have to have like this incredible scientific array of what you offered people, which sounds like it could get very expensive. What's the best way to mimic a micronutrient diet to be able to support ourselves and anyone that we know might be struggling, especially with anxiety or depression?
Well, I will say in general for mood, for the best mood, it's really lifestyle changes. So getting enough exercise. I heard someone say the other day, if we can sweat every day, you're on the right track. Getting enough sleep, it's really important. Ideally 7 or 8 hours of sleep for adults, and 9 or 10 for kids. Less than that, you run the risk of not having enough time for your brain to clean itself out, in a non-technical sort of way of speaking. And then the dietary patterns that show the greatest benefit overall, just in a really general sense, are the Mediterranean diet. Basically, if you look at the ingredients, if what you're eating comes in a packet, first of all, if it has more than 5 ingredients, if it has words that you can't pronounce, if it's something that your grandmother wouldn't know what it was, then it's probably not in the healthy food category. So fewer ingredients, the better. I mean, there's a lot more that could be said about it, but what we know, particularly the families that we work with, when they have a child or children that are difficult, there may be another parent that has some of those challenges, and family life can get tricky. So if you've got this really complicated diet that you have to follow, it can be a little bit problematic. So try to keep it simple, unprocessed foods as much as possible. In terms of the micronutrients, it's tricky because what's available off the shelf is generally not at the right dose level to be therapeutic when someone's having symptoms. So this is actually treating.
Yeah.
The other thing is, so many of the vitamins come in multiple forms, and that's very important, the type of form that they're in. And I also want to say I have no affiliation with any of the manufacturers that we're working with that provide the formulas. And the direction that they're going with the formulas is to go from capsules, which is what we're using now, to a powdered form, whether you put that directly in your mouth or you mix it with water. So they're also moving forward towards new ways of making it available and reducing the price.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
It's good news. I want you to just talk briefly about how people can get involved in the study if they are interested.
Great. Well, thank you. If you are interested, if you know someone who's interested, a child between the ages of 6 and 12, they don't need an ADHD diagnosis. We will work with, we have some questions to do screening on that. And they need to be off of medication for at least 2 weeks and for the duration of the study. They would email healthykids@ohsu.edu or call 503-494-3700.
Jenny Johnstone, thank you so much. It was really, really fascinating to talk with you. Appreciate your work.
Thank you for having me.